Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Pagan's Witchy Corner. My name is Pagan, and I am joined by a really awesome author, Jenny Tyson, who wrote two really great books. Really great books, guys. These are The Art of Scrying and Dowsing and The Art of Channeling. I have devoured both of these books. I loved them both. They had so much amazing knowledge and so much great, useful information in them. Some of which I have actually put into my own practice for our Seance Saturdays. So if you've ever attended any of those, some of those techniques have come from these books. So Jenny, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so glad that you are here. I'm so glad we finally got to connect. And I'm also glad that you were able to survive Fiona. Some of these hurricanes this year have been pretty wild.
Yeah, it came in at kind of in a weird way. Cape Breton usually doesn't get a direct hit from hurricanes. We usually get stuff that comes over from the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
And this hurricane almost went from like east to west
Oh,
instead of
wow.
going at kind of a northeasterly or northwesterly direction, which is what most of them do when they come through here. And so we got hit hard. Um, it was a mess, but we've pretty much got it cleaned up.
Well, I'm
So,
glad that everything is okay. I'm glad that you guys are okay. And hopefully that will be the last one that you guys see for a very long time.
yes.
Well, let's start with your first book that I have, which is The Art of Scrying and Dowsing. Where did this book kind of come from? How did you decide to, what kind of was your thought process said, I'm going to sit down and write this book?
Well, I after Spiritual Alchemy, I didn't know if I was ever going to write another book again. I I just I had to get a handle on the new things that were happening to me, the new abilities that I had,
Mm-hmm.
and that kind of took priority. But in the process of learning how to do that, I also learned a great deal about scrying and about channeling that I'd never seen before. And, I was able to, I was sort of like putting things together in odd ways. And as that, as those oddities kind of came together, it developed into a new system of scrying.
Mm-hmm.
And I started experimenting with teaching others, just grabbing people, a person here, a person there. Hey, you got 5 minutes? And finding out that it was that the information could be transmitted to another person fairly easily, and I could get people to actually do scrying within, a very short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how but the scrying and channeling was at one time, initially, both of those books were one manuscript, and manuscript was much bigger than the 2 books actually are. The manuscript was over 600 pages long,
Oh my goodness.
and that 600 pages was written in the period of about 3 months. So the book kinda dropped on my head, and I had to write it out. I just had to go.
Mm-hmm.
And, eh and so, I mean, it was through the editing process that I ended up splitting the 2 books,
Right.
and just to help the focus, and just because there was so much information, and I didn't exactly know what to do with everything that was coming at me. So
Mm-hmm.
the book it was more of something that it was a compilation of experiences, but the inspiration just hit me all at one time, and the fingers were flying.
I mean, when the writing gods tell you to write, you better write.
Don't have any choice. It just
You
sort of
don't.
it's gonna come whether you want it or not. I mean, it's just one of those things.
That is very true. And as somebody who has read both books, I am very glad that you actually broke them up because there's so much information jam-packed into both of those books, and they're not very large books. But I would say that if you had kept them as one, you probably would have overloaded some brains out there. So it's probably a good idea that you broke them up. But
Even
they were
even as
still
they
great.
even as they are, I still find that a lot of people have trouble with the density of the information,
Yeah.
and I need to kind of spread. I think next time I write something, it's going to be spread out a little bit better, as far as the information density is concerned. I just don't like to put a lot of crap in there. I mean, it's just like but you have to put in examples
Mhm.
and go over things a little bit more carefully. Otherwise, it's just it's information overload.
Yeah, definitely so. And sometimes having that filler is, as I call it, is a lot easier for people to kind of get that, nice download of information from the books. There is a lot in there, but it is all very valuable information. And if you are somebody who is even remotely interested in scrying, or even just really wants to know what it is and kind of how it works, these books are the books you want to pick up. So here's my shameless prompt. Everybody go buy a copy. Go, check out a copy from your local library. If they don't have it, please request a copy. Your libraries will buy a copy for their own stuff. Always support your local libraries, everybody. It's a good thing. Trust me. So anyway, moving on. So you founded a whole brand new version of scrying. Can you kind of break that down just very briefly for everybody and kind of how it differs from traditional scrying?
Okay. Well, I the information that I got, the method I got actually stems from what I was reading from Nostradamus. And I believe, I don't know for sure because Nostradamus is very brief about how he did his scrying sessions.
Mm-hmm.
But he was a professional. He didn't have time to spend hours and hours with that basin up in his attic or closet or whatever he did. The idea of it is what I call flash scrying. It's a fast method where um, you you perceive something and write it down.
Mm-hmm.
And the writing it down, and in writing it down, ideally it should be a sketch.
Yes.
That's one of the things that is very, very important. Like, if you're doing traditional scrying, you're sitting there and you're kind of going into a trance and waiting for like objects moving, waiting to see objects moving in the speculum or the crystal ball or basin of water, which is what I prefer to use.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you're watching for that vision to come. Now, that was the original method that I was taught, and that's the method that Edward Kelly used because if you read in his diaries with John Dee, he would sit there sometimes for hours before something would happen. So he was gazing into that speculum intently and sitting very still and paying very close attention, um, waiting for something to appear. That's the normal like scrying, which are what most people are taught.
Mm-hmm.
That's that's the what I call the stare and prayer. It's like you're going into your kind of an altered state, and you have the speculum in front of you, and you're trying to induce like a sequential vision in that. Now, with my method, I find that it works better if you, instead of waiting for a vision, you're like stirring. Now, Nostradamus describes stirring the water. So I like to kind of stir it up. And then
Mm-hmm.
I glance at it, and the first thing that comes to mind are going to be shapes, and movement. Um, Colors will come next. So you're say shapes. First thing you see is a shape. You write that shape that you sketch that shape out, and then you add shapes to it. So I like to have the original shape and then work around it. And then eventually you develop something of a picture, kind of a crude picture as to what's going on. And then you interpret it. You write down everything that you feel and you don't judge it. You go quick. You have to go bam, bam,
Mm-hmm.
bam. Okay, so like if your color, green, blue, yellow, I see something moving. It looks liquid, liquid. You just keep going like that. Um, and you need to work very, very quickly with this. My sessions, I rarely go over 30 minutes per session.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I might have multiple sessions, but each session goes very, very quickly because after 30 minutes, my brain starts to like lose the focus and I'm not any good. It's
Yeah.
just you get a lot of junk after that. The best impressions are usually within the first 2 minutes of the session. The first 2 to 5 minutes is where the best work is for me most of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and another thing another difference that I have with type of scrying is that I tell the beginner to describe what are called like location, um, event type targets, and this is the same kind of target that's used in controlled remote viewing.
Right.
It's a physical location like the Eiffel Tower, or I picked up the Newfoundland Ferry.
Hmm.
I believe was one of the examples in that book. And the Newfoundland Ferry is just like it's a boat dock where they take trucks, cars, and people from Cape Breton to St. John, or what's left of Port aux Basques.
Hmm. So that's a really when I was reading it, especially the channeling book, it was one of those things that, knowing what I know about remote viewing, there were so many correlations to it, and I was like, okay, well, we've done some of these practices before. And the interesting thing is, before I had read that book, I was like, wow, a lot of these practices I've done, but I didn't realize I was doing similar to your method. Even though I read the scrying book, I just never put two and two together until I read the channeling book, and I was like, oh, so that's what I've been doing. No wonder it works.
Well, I mean, I do take some of the principal concepts from CRV, control remote viewing. And it certainly had a lot of influence on the system, because that's really the first psychic system that I learned.
Right.
Once I developed clairaudience and clairvoyance. I mean, this kind of happened precipitously with me. And I was middle-aged when this happened. I was not born with this, with clairaudience.
Hmm.
This developed in my 40s. So it was a little bit tricky to try and cope with, because I thought I was going nuts.
I mean, I think that's how everybody feels when their, gifts of psychic abilities start to really open up. They kind of feel like, oh, I'm nuts. That's what's wrong with me. I'm just crazy. It's fine.
Yeah.
I'm crazy. It's cool. But it's very interesting though, especially with anybody who may be kind of on the fence, and you may be going, well, I don't know if I really trust this. I don't know how I feel about all this. Uh, if you're interested in remote viewing, especially in terms of like channeling, scrying, and all of that, remote viewing was actually done by the US government.
Yes.
You can
And
actually go and learn all about it. You can read it. Just I think it's the CIA documents on remote viewing. It's actually a very interesting thing. It was done way back, I want to say in like,
it was the
yeah, I
1970s.
was going to say the 70s. I was about to say late
Yeah.
60s, early
There are
70s.
two groups, just kind of going briefly to the history of it. I I was taught, that's the first thing that's what I learned.
Hmm.
So like I said, it does have a lot of influence on the system, but the system that I was taught is a 7-step system. Very cumbersome, kind of slow, kind of difficult, not very intuitive, not doesn't flow well. And it uses a lot of jargon, techno jargon,
Yeah, it does.
and I don't like techno jargon. I like things to be plain and simple. And my husband, when he's editing, likes it even more.
Because then he's probably not having to look up all the words and go, I don't know what this means. What are you talking about here? Um, yeah, no, the techno jargon with remote viewing is definitely something that makes it very difficult for a novice to understand. So
Yeah,
if you're, you want to learn the history about it, yeah, it's very interesting. Bring a dictionary though, because it's going
yeah.
to be one of those things where you're going to be looking up a lot of the jargon, trying to understand it.
But
But this book definitely helps break down away from the jargon and makes it a lot simpler and a lot easier for anybody to really step into.
the idea also is like, you know, I'm gonna take some of the things that I learned from CRV, and I'm gonna apply it to the ancient art of scrying.
Yes.
And I'm gonna take some of the things that they learned in SRI with the remote, with the studies, the psychic studies, especially those done with Ingo Swann, and I'm gonna, like the sketching, that's influenced by Ingo Swann. He felt that sketching was always a more accurate way. Well, I tested that out. I agree with him.
Hmm.
But the problem with CRV is that it's all verbal. And it was like, okay, Ingo Swann didn't teach that. It's not how he taught people how to work, and everybody ignored it. So they kind of, cherry picked what he said, and some of the things that he said, you should have taken seriously.
Yes. And when it
So
comes to sketching as well, it's sketching versus automatic writing. Automatic writing is one of those things, but as I'm trying to do the automatic writing, my brain is trying to slow down to try to get spelling correctly, which is not something
Mhm.
you're supposed to do. You're supposed to just let your hand flow and go all that stuff. My analytical brain cannot do that. It's like, stop, you misspelled that word, fix it. And it tries to slow me down, which takes me out of the trance and all this. So I really like what you said about sketching, because I had never thought about doing automatic sketching.
Yeah.
And so I was like, oh, well, that wouldn't have any of the word issues. You wouldn't have to worry about perfectionism. You wouldn't have to worry about this because you're just free sketching. And so you also don't have to be a really great artist to do automatic sketching, just for the record. Stick figures work just fine, as you say in your book.
Yes. I leave the stick figures in the book intentionally. Now, I am an artist. And in fact, I've got 26 or so, um, paintings and sketches published,
Hmm.
in various places, and, so I can do the artwork, but I don't do my artwork when I'm doing, like, channeling or anything else like that, the automatic sketching, anything, it's all stick figures,
Right.
and I left the stick figures in the book, and it looks kinda crude. It doesn't look as professional as some books do, but I want people to see,
Hmm.
"Oh, yeah, it's really kind of all over the place, and
Yeah.
it's not really all that well done." So I don't feel want people to feel like, "Oh, I've got to be the super artist to have everything just perfect." It's not it doesn't work like that. You go fast, and sometimes when you get rolling, it's hard to keep up with everything.
Yes.
So your sketches are very crude.
Very, very understandable with that. So kind of segueing into the art of channeling, which we've kind of been doing anyway, but obviously it was the second half of the first book, but did you make when you trying to think of how I want to phrase this question. When you wrote The Art of Scrying and Dowsing versus The Art of Channeling, did you keep them all and just be like, I'm going to split my manuscript in half versus kind of the subject load? Or
Oh,
did
no.
you write them at separate times? And when you basically started putting them and being like, oh, I need to put this into two books, and you kind of started working out how you wanted to do that, was there a break between the two?
No, it was like I slammed from one into the other, and the editing for The Art of Channeling was really tough to do because I had to make it a standalone book.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, this was more of a, more for publishing and because editor upstairs said that it had to be done this way. But you know what? He's always right.
Mm-hmm.
He really is.
I mean, the spouses often are. They usually know us better than we know ourselves some days.
Yes. So anyways, I had to make it a standalone, but I didn't want it to be too repetitive to the other book.
Right.
So, I mean, I had to take this and the manuscript was originally a lot more complex. The system was originally a lot more complex than what you see in that book. That's been simplified quite a bit.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Because I had this thing going double blind initially, which means that, you have to set it up and have someone else scramble it around and number it, and then do the same thing with whoever you're talking to. So you had to draw both the entity and the and the question out of a grab bag.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, no, this doesn't work very well. It was too complex. So I was finally able to get it to work, without, like, trying to force blind everything,
Mm-hmm.
and then started to realize, "Hey, maybe I'm overemphasizing the blind target thing," because that came from remote viewing,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
and that came also from, I mean, because you have to have that get away from that, belief and expectation bias. It's otherwise it's really tough to get a really pure and good channel if you can't get out of
Right.
that mode.
Yes.
So how much does the question became, how much does it really take to get out of that mode where you're going into belief and expectation bias? And I found that you can know who you're talking to and and then have like and then choose from like four questions. As long as the questions are very different, and as long as at least one of them has information that you can go back and check and see if it's real.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that kind of reality check, if as long as the potential for a reality check exists within the target pool, then you tend to hold on to the better to the channel rather than going with what you believe or expect the entity to say.
Right. That is very
So,
true. Very, very
so
true.
the system, I was then able to kind of simplify things quite a bit, and that's how we ended up with what you saw. The focus is on, again, if the focus is on sketching, just the sketching alone um, tends to make things more accurate.
I would say
And
that's very true. After, playing with it a little bit and trying it versus the automatic writing, and even having a, kind of partner take notes and all of that, I would say that it's definitely something that makes it a lot easier, because sometimes it's also very hard if you're doing it with like a group or a partner who's asking the questions, who's, taking the notes and all that. Sometimes it goes too fast and they can't keep up. Other times it makes it to where it's very hard for you to verbally convey what you're seeing, because it might be so elaborate. In some of my instances, I have seen very elaborate kind of visions where I'm like, oh, how do I convey this into words?
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's very difficult in that regard. So having it, if you take the time and actually sketch it out, even just the generalized ideas of it, it makes it a lot easier to be like, oh yeah, there was this over here, and this is what I was seeing over here, and that's what this was, and then you can start to interpret it from there, which makes it a lot easier.
yeah. And we did. Can I tell you a story?
Yes, of course.
Well, I you saw the high ET part of it, the CE5,
Yeah.
human initiated ET contact.
Yes.
Um, that's my baby. I that's a really big area of interest for me. Um, the but the when I when I when I did it, the experiment, I experimented with the system before I actually finally sent it in. I wanted to see if it would work how it would work in a group setting.
Yeah.
And this was before the Art of Channeling was published, right? So I we had a group of people who we have a group of people who were interested in human initiated contact. It's local, it was in Nova Scotia, and so we decided they wanted me to come over and show them how to do this. And I told them about what I was doing, so they wanted to come over and they wanted me to come over and say, okay, let's try it and see what we come up with. So I did. I did, about that time that, the Rogan interview came out with, Bob Lazar.
Hmm.
So I decided to try a couple of those as part of the target pool. I wanted to find out if some of this was true.
Right.
And so that's, and we didn't know who we were interviewing. We just left it to a non-specific ET that was involved, whose craft was involved with that, with that experimentation, or who had invented element 115 moscovium. And, the information that we came up with was really something else. It was just crazy. Um, the it came out to the element, but I mean, everyone was like the shape of it and the color of it exactly matched what Lazar had said in
Oh,
the
that's
session.
wild. I love that.
I'm it was like when we sit there and played the recording and looked at our sketches, it was like, oh my gosh.
Those are always so much fun. And that's kind of one of the best things about when we were doing our seance Saturdays. One of the things that we do is we just kind of go into it with our little group, except we were doing it virtually. It was all online.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so sometimes we would do like spirit board, other times we would do um like spirit box. Sometimes we do channeling. We have done everything from Estes method to dream machine and all sorts of fun different things. And so it's a really kind of fun thing that's probably my favorite part of any sort of spirit communication or any form of channeling that we've ever done, is the go in and see who you talk to and see what you come out with on the other side.
yes,
I love the
yes.
experimentation of it. It's always so much fun.
Yes.
It makes me very excited to just kind of go into it. And you really never know what you're going to end up with. It's always a mystery by the end of it because you're like, I have no idea who we were actually talking to. And then you review all your evidence and it's like, oh, well, that's very interesting. I guess we did hit our target. It doesn't feel like it in the moment until you're done and you look at everything.
Yeah, it doesn't. Isn't that strange though? It doesn't really always feel like all I mean, the intensity can vary because sometimes it can get intense,
Mm-hmm.
uh, but it doesn't always have to,
Right.
get intense. Like, we did an outdoor session one time, and the next morning, we were camping. Next morning, it was a group of 5 of us. We go out the next morning, and there's a silver disc hanging over the camp
Like just
in
like
broad
like a
daylight.
silver, like are we talking like
I
UFO or like
Yes.
CD? Oh wow,
No,
that's
it was
interesting.
a UFO. It was solid. It was a solid silver craft hanging, and it wasn't I mean, it was like it was above the trees. It was a safe distance away. It wasn't so close that we were like, "Oh my gosh, are they gonna take us on board?" Sort of thing. Um, but it 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 was I'd never seen one that close in the daylight, and there was no feature you couldn't see any features. It was beautiful. It was a really smooth, really beautiful, craft, and the way that it moved was bizarre. It wobbled in the air,
Oh,
and then
that's
it jumped, and,
interesting.
like, when it moved forward, it didn't just move forward, it, like, hopped. It, like, disappeared and reappeared, boom, and did so sequentially.
Huh.
It had a
That's
very
interesting.
Yeah, and we didn't we were all sitting there with our mouths hanging open, and not a photograph did we get, not a single one. I was like, I did not wanna take my eyes off of it.
It's so funny because, a lot of times when people are like, "Oh, I saw a ghost," or "I saw," it's like, "Well, why didn't you get it on camera?" Well, because half the time you're too astonished at what you're seeing to actually remember, oh, grab the phone and hit record. Some people are very adaptive, just automatically do that. Other people, yeah, you just kind of are like, wow, that's a thing. What do I look at it? And you're trying to figure it out and you don't remember that you even own a phone half the time. So,
Well, I mean, it was just first thing in the morning. I hadn't even had my first cup of coffee
oh,
yet,
yeah,
you know?
then
I
even then
mean,
you
come
wouldn't
on.
remember.
No, the brain was only half functioning at this point in time.
I completely understand that. My brain doesn't function without that first cup of coffee either. So,
Mm.
that is super, super cool. If it ever happens again, I'd love to absolutely hear about it because I'm a sucker for learning about all that kind of stuff. So I think that's a really neat experience. Now, do you have any classes, workshops, anything that's, kind of up in the air or that you've got planned out in the future that people can sign up for, or do you have any future books planned, even though these
Well,
two were pretty elaborate?
yeah. There will probably be a book in the future. Um, I'm I'm working along the lines of healing, and
Mm-hmm.
and I I recently I was doing some studies, so I'm doing some studies leading up to this. And again, we're gonna go back to my space alien friends. Okay. But the vast bulk of physical um trace evidence left by extraterrestrials on Earth that interact with people on Earth is healing. And
Yes.
I have probably close to, at this point, these are in the form of books, 2,500 pages that record ET healings. Preston Dennett alone has almost 400 cases in one book,
Oh
and
wow.
it's and I pick up maybe 1 or 2 cases a week, just here and there. And they're not only leaving, like, healed humans on the Earth, they're they're also leaving some of their technology. For example, they used like, some sort of salve, as part of their organ regeneration.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and they gave, the patient, they gave them 2 vials of the salve that was used for the hospital to analyze.
Oh, that's interesting.
So it wasn't I mean, it's not w they're not leaving craft technology intentionally, although I do believe that probably some craft have crashed here.
Yes.
Um, but they're leaving healing technology, their health technology, I think some of those implants that have been recovered are probably intentionally left there so that humans could look at them, so they could be analyzed by expert witnesses. And this isn't just happening in small numbers. This is happening quite extensively and worldwide.
Hmm.
So it to me, this is a communication attempt. I mean, what are they communicating here? They're interested in healthcare. They're interested in health, healing. Um, so they're that's where they're sharing, that's where they're initiating contact. They're not doing it about craft or about social structure or anything else. It's about healing. And I think for us, if we follow that lead, we need
Hmm.
to we need to start looking at alternatives in healing because and that's what I'm interested in for my next book because I think we've kind of maxed out. I think we're kind of peaking out with the pharmacology, even the herbal pharmacology.
I think so
Um,
too. I think that we have so many new diseases and bacteria and viruses that are getting so smart that, if you want to look at it in terms of intelligence, and there's probably some folks out there that are like, bacteria can't be smart. Bacteria is very intelligent, and many scientists will tell you this. And so it's one of those things that I think that because it's so rapidly changing, not only that, you mix in climate change and all the other things, we're going to start seeing whole brand new issues of healthcare that we
yeah,
don't have answers for yet. And I
yeah,
think that exploring new options is definitely something that we have to do, especially
yes,
for survival of humanity.
yes. Yeah, and I think that doing that and the way that their technology works on psychospiritual principles and psychospiritual skills. That's why they're trying to tell us to meditate because learning how to do that depends on us developing that way. We have to develop that way in
Yes.
order to use their tools, their technology, their techniques.
Well, and our science has even proven that how meditation can actually heal the body and the different frequencies of meditation, especially if you reach the different waves within the body and all that, and it can promote different forms of healing. We have tons of healing modalities that access that already, but I think that definitely tapping into whatever consciousness is out there as well. And I say consciousness very loosely because, when it comes to alien craft, spirit craft, whatever you want to call it, there's so many different things out there that we as humans will never understand. So having those different modalities and understanding how they work on an earthly basis and then being able to tap into something that is unknown is extremely fascinating.
Yes. And I think the channeling, especially the channeling, the information in the scrying and channeling book will help us access that
Yes.
because it allows us to bypass some of that conscious mind analytical yuckiness, difficulty that we have and allows us to get into that information without really going into an altered state. Now, that's just at a beginner level. If you go into a more advanced level where you're going into a deeper state and you're still trying to exclude that, you're going to get some really interesting information. You have to go deeper in, start working with the trance, but also working with the exclusion factor too. And if you do that, and continue to follow those principles but going into a deeper mental state, going into astral projection even, um, then you're going to really get some information that's really amazing.
Yes, absolutely. That sounds like it's going to be an incredible book whenever you get it written. I am
If I
very
get it.
I'm excited to read it whenever it gets there. Um,
Yeah. And I'm also I'm and this is just at the beginning stage right now. I am looking to do more access with technologies. I've been very reluctant to do this up to this point. I like to teach face to face.
mhm.
Um, but I'm also a lot of people I think are missing out because I mean, I live in a very inaccessible place.
I understand.
I um it takes me about 5 hours to drive to the nearest airport.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that's not I mean, there's no traffic up here. I get grumpy for 4 cars that I have to wait 4 cars before pulling out into the road. It's like, where are all these people coming from? There's no traffic. I mean, we go cycling. Sometimes we don't see any cars at all
Oh,
in our
wow.
cycling. None.
That's wild. I
So
live in a
so
big
we have
city, so
well, I was in Indianapolis and I hadn't seen traffic in 3 years and I mean, the air was horrible. I couldn't hardly
Mhm.
breathe. Um, and the noise was just it was deafening. It was constant.
Yes.
I was a mess the first until I kind of get adjusted to it after a while. But when I first got down there, it was like, "Oh, I can't do this. I can't stay here."
Mhm.
And, if you get out in a quiet place in the woods and, it'll feel good. I don't know.
It's very, very true. I'm lucky to live in the middle of a big city, but I also live on a farm, so I get a little quiet, except when the
Yes.
animals decide to get a little rambunctious. I have a lot
Oh,
of woodland creatures that get very loud some days.
yes.
We had a pack of coyotes literally on the other side of our fence the other night, and they were
Oh,
all just screaming and
oh,
howling and yipping, and I'm like telling my small little chihuahua, and I'm like, honey, you gotta come in the house. They will eat you. They will eat you. Come in the house.
and the chihuahua's gonna chew them up and spit them out.
Well, she was actually kind of looking at me like, Mom, are we good? I'm like, just come in the house. Come in the house. It's fine. uh,
Um,
but yeah, I think that that's a very, if you ever do teach classes on remotely, it's actually not terrible, especially if you use products like Zoom. Zoom, you can have like 100 people in a class or something
oh,
like
wow.
that. Yeah, it's actually really nice. It takes a minute to learn, but once you get there, you're not bad. It's not bad at all. Zoom had a little bit of a learning curve for me, but once I got there, I was actually really comfortable with it, and I'm very thankful for Zoom now. In this crazy, crazy world, and the cool thing about it too is when you teach remotely, people who are chronically ill and can't travel and stuff like that, they have access to your classes that way too.
Yeah, yeah. So that's gonna be, that's gonna be a work in the future,
Hmm.
in the near future. I'm working on that now. And I'll be providing, um, through the publisher, through Mark, um, links, to that when
Oh, nice.
as things develop, so people will have access to it. Um, and let's see what else is going on. I think that's pretty much, where I'm at right now.
Perfect.
Uh, I retired next year. 2023 is my last full year, in the health profession, and I'm going to attempt once again to retire. I've tried this before, and I couldn't stay away.
Well, I mean, I understand that.
Oh, this
So
is from my day job. This is like I'm a nurse, so I
oh,
mean, yeah, this
heavens
isn't
bless
from
you for just being
yeah.
a nurse in this crazy world right now. Wow. Thank you. It's almost like serving in the military some days for a lot of nurses. So, thank you for serving the community because I know it's very hard, especially with all the COVID stuff that's happened. So,
Yeah, it's been challenging sometimes.
mhm.
We've had some problem. We were late in getting any kind of COVID because we're like a remote area, so
Right.
didn't really come up here until like almost a fourth wave. We didn't until Omicron came out. We didn't have any. Eh,
What?
yeah, well,
Wow.
yeah, we didn't have very much up here at all until then, and I think we fared really well with it. I mean, we had a chance to get the vaccine out before everybody started getting sick.
That's a really good thing, though. I mean, it's
Yeah.
kind of crazy to think about that, you guys didn't see anything till almost Omicron hit, and then it's like, whoa. Whereas, like
Well,
2 months after it
remember,
hit the US, we
we're on
were,
an island. We're on an
yeah,
island here. So, and nobody, I mean, like when they shut things down, nobody's going to come up to the parks. The only reason to come up here is for the parks and the Kayleys, which are like music concerts that we have.
right.
Uh, so if they're shut down, if those two things are shut down, Cape Breton's not that interesting.
Well, either way, I'm glad that you guys were lucky in that regard. So, that's a really cool thing. And I hope that, in the coming year, when you get to retire, you'll have a lot more free time to
Well, it'll be
write the books and
2024.
chase the
It will be in
universe.
attempt. I will attempt. No, that Now, if you were with my coworkers, they would say, "Don't listen to her because she's not going to do it." Because I tried to a couple of times and it didn't. I lasted about a month.
Oh, I completely understand that. But, whenever you get there, at least you'll have lots of time to chase the universe and all that fun stuff.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Definitely gonna be doing some of that.
Well, Jenny, this has been absolutely wonderful. I'm so glad that you got to join me on the show. Everyone who has listened to this, and hopefully you enjoyed this wonderful conversation that we had, please go check out all of Jenny's works. And if you can, pick up a copy. If not, please check one out from your local library. It is something that I highly, highly recommend. You guys will learn so much great and valuable information from her books. And everybody out there, stay safe, take care of yourselves, and I'll see y'all next time. Bye, everybody.